What's up guys, Lifting here. In this video I'm going to give you a guide to my Scorching Ray Trickster that I've been playing recently. My intent with this build was to try and see if I could make a pure Scorching Ray build viable to kill the Shaper. Because the skill itself is actually really fun to use. And it turned out to be pretty great. I've killed the Shaper with this. I've done all the Guardians, Deathless too, or except for Chimera, I never tried that one. The strength of the build lies in its, well, damage, but also it has pretty good clear speed in maps. However, there is the significant weakness of Scorching Ray not having an on-hit mechanic, and because of that, you can't leech with the skill either. So you have to rely purely on your regen and, of course, your fairly large energy shield pool. But it does get a bit sketchy sometimes, and it's not something I would recommend playing in hardcore. Also, to get to the point where I was able to take down the Shaper, I had invested a fairly, well, decent sum of currency into this. The build is scaled via Grain Spectrum jewels, and each of these jewels that increase your spell damage cost me 35 chaos approximately. So obviously that tends to get a little expensive, and in this build, the complete build, you will be able to have 11 Grain Spectrum jewels. I think I currently have 10 or even just 9 in the tree right now. I think it's 10. And the damage, of course, is pretty good with the Grain Spectrums, and it's a really efficient way of scaling the damage of Scorching Ray, and it is by far superior to getting a lot of the other jewels with damage modifications on them, because you can only get fire damage, damage over time, and then the generic increased damage if you wanted the pure offensive for jewels. So you would have to get some really good rolls of that together with something else in order for it to be able to compete with the Grain Spectrum jewels. However, when you use the Grain Spectrums, you are, of course, doing it at the cost of having to branch into less efficient sockets, such as this one down here. This is a 5-point jewel, but at the same time, I did need the strength too, so it wasn't too bad. And the damage, once you get, once you get +7, it really does start to make a very nice difference. The other part of the skill tree is pretty much just energy shield. There's some damage over time nodes. There's some increased duration to, well, increase the duration of the debuff that Scorching Ray applies. Basically, it works so that Scorching Ray, when you attack a target over an extended duration of time, you will get damage multipliers, I think is the word, and you will reduce the target's fire resistance. This can stack up to 8 times, and for each stack you will get -3 for a total of -24 fire resistance onto the target. And by increasing the duration here, you will also make it so that the burn effect that Scorching Ray leaves, well, it lingers for longer. That is the debuff, and that's really nice when you are mapping, so you can just swipe over the monsters and then they will burn to death. And then, because Scorching Ray doesn't have an on-hit mechanic, we can utilize the Elemental Equilibrium node. So what I typically do is that I just cast my Orb of Storms, and that makes them vulnerable to fire damage. This is very powerful when you're doing that against bosses and so forth. And it also has the added bonus of triggering Elemental Overload for a massive damage boost. And furthermore, I am also picking up Zealot's Oath over here, and I'm using that together with my Stone Golem and my Sulfur Flask here. Now, when you activate these, you can see that the regen, we have a constant energy shield regen of 328, and if you use the Sulfur Flask, it goes up to 704. This is really nice and a quality of life thing when you don't, or when you're not able to leech. So I found that to be worth it, and the Stone Golem taunts, which is nice too when you are playing this type of build. But let's take a look at the skill gems. So main setup is Scorching Ray, Rapid Decay, Controlled Destruction, and that's because spell damage modifiers apply to Scorching Ray. Normally a Burn Beam doesn't do that, but for Scorching Ray it does. Elemental Focus, increased burning damage, and Empower. You could get more damage if you used less duration instead of increased burn damage. And it would probably work great against a target where you are constantly attacking it and keeping up the debuff. However, for just general mapping and for encounters where you can't rely on having it up all the time, I think you're better off using increased burn damage, but the damage multiplier from less duration is very nice too. And then to increase the damage, because we scale it that way, I'm also using Searing Bond, Empower, increased burning damage, elemental focus, and minion and totem elemental resistances. And with Searing Bond you can always set up 2, and it works pretty well. It gives a decent amount of damage. Searing Bond by itself, unbuffed right now, is 33,000 fire damage per second. And unbuffed tool tip basic here for Scorching Ray is 33,000. When you go outside, trigger Elemental Overload and use your flasks, the tooltip currently goes up to around 50,000 DPS. And that's of course without any of the debuffs that have been applied, so it goes even higher, of course, the damage. Then I'm running 2 Vaal Disciplines linked to increase duration, and that is to help with that energy shield recharge in those situations where you are getting swarmed. By activating these, you'll be able to, well, out-regen the damage that's coming in. It's very, very useful for a build such as this that doesn't leech. For mana reservation, I'm using Arctic Armor, Clarity, because the Scorching Ray can be a little hard to sustain, and Discipline, of course. So when I cast my Scorching Ray right now, you can see I sustain it pretty well, but eventually it will run out. And Clarity does help with this quite a lot. In my boot setup, I had that Orb of Storms. I use it to crit to trigger Elemental Overload. And together with Curse on Hit, I apply my Flammability Curse here. And then finally, in the glove setup, I have Flame Dash linked with faster casting and Stone Golem. And again, the Stone Golem is there for the regen, but also for the taunt. It is pretty valuable for this type of build. And there's a few reasons why I chose the Trickster. So the first one is that all the minor nodes that we're going through, they all give cast speed. And cast speed is nice when you want to turn the beam around, and it also makes the debuff apply faster. The main thing, however, is Patient Reaper. It gives damage over time, which affects the Scorching Ray, and Shade Form, which gives us a flat 250 energy shield, some cast speed too, and some evasion, which is actually not too bad for this time of build. And the 250 maximum flat energy shield is pretty important for this setup, because since we are using a staff, we can't use a shield to scale our energy shield, and the 250 really makes a big difference here. And then finally, Weave the Arcane. Scorching Ray can be quite hard to sustain mana-wise because you can't leech mana back. So Weave the Arcane gives you that mana regen and increases your mana pool, and this also scales together with Clarity, which we're running. So Weave the Arcane is really nice. If you can sustain it without Weave the Arcane, then Walk the Aether is nicer, because you get that increased attack and cast speed if you've used the movement skill recently, and you do that all the time, and again it allows you to turn the beam faster. And as for the gear, I'm using a Searing Touch right now. This is a legacy one. You don't need to use the legacy one, but a legacy one allows you to use it from level 13, so you can level with it. And the nice thing about a Searing Touch is the 2+ to levels. It gives a lot of damage boost. You get spell damage, again applies to Scorching Ray, fire damage works, cast speed for the beam, and then of course increased burn damage. Secondly, I'm using a Dodrace Damning so we can have an additional curse. So I'm using Flammability, and then together with the Witchfire Brew here, that applies the Vulnerability Curse and gives more damage over time. Then an Eye of Chayula to prevent stuns, and for a bit of those attributes it helps. And then the most gimmicky thing is probably the Ascent from Flesh. It was recently buffed, it gives a lot more energy shield now. But the nice thing is that you have phasing if energy shield recharge has started recently. And when that happens, you have 6% chance to dodge attacks while phasing, and you get some increased movement speed too. Now the nice thing about that is that you can force that with a Quartz Flask to give you phasing. And then when you activate that, you can see your chance to dodge both spells and attacks increases by quite a lot. And that's of course also because you get it from the flask, but you get that extra from the Ascent from Flesh. It's not necessary at all, but I kind of like the extra layer of defense that you get from this. But a crystal belt can provide more resistances and make your gearing a little easier. But I actually think this is a decently powerful defense for the cost of one alchemy orb. And I think those are the main things. The way I leveled this was to use a freezing pulse until level 12. Then I picked up a Scorching Ray. At level 13 you can put that in the Legacy Searing Touch. If you have one, you don't need it, but it's nice. It's a good boost from the get-go. And then I just rolled from there. I transitioned to CI at level 69. And if you do that, make sure to pick up a lot of life notes on the way and then spec out of them later so you don't become, well, incredibly miserable. But that's what I wanted to show you guys. There are build details in the description of the video. It was a fun build. I enjoyed this. The damage was good, but it's not the safest build. So keep that in mind. Try it out if you like Scorching Ray, but with some reluctance maybe if you're playing in hardcore at least. Thank you for watching, and bros, do you even nerd?